Hello, welcome to the Live to 110 podcast. My name is Wendy Myers, and you can find me at liveto110.com and at mineralpower.com. That's my healing and detox program. Today we have Izabella Wentz on the program. I met her recently at the Bulletproof Biohacking Conference. I was so pleased to finally meet her in person as we were doing this interview today. So it was nice to meet her ahead of time. And we're going to be talking about the thyroid, healing the thyroid naturally, and specifically Hashimoto's autoimmune disease. This is a huge, huge problem. Autoimmune diseases are one of the fastest growing subset of diseases in the world. And the majority of people that have thyroid dysfunction or low thyroid function, also called hypothyroidism, actually have autoimmune Hashimoto's. So we're going to be talking about how to reverse this naturally and even perhaps getting off your medication. That is an option for some people. Please keep in mind that this podcast is solely informational in nature and is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Please consult your healthcare practitioner before following any advice that we suggest today on the show. I'm so excited. My supplement Liver Rehab, which is the brand Bio Rehab, is on Amazon. It's doing really, really well. We've had lots of amazing reviews of people that are really being helped with the supplement. And I'm so pleased because I've been taking it since it came out 2 months ago. And I've been feeling really, really good. I can really tell it's assisting my liver function. And I felt like a little bit of boost of energy taking it. And I've had the same reports from a lot of my clients and a lot of the people reviewing on Amazon, reviewing Liver Rehab, that they are feeling a lot better because people don't realize how overtaxed our livers are. Our livers are so overburdened with toxins. The CDC has established we have over 500 chemicals in our body, not to mention dozens of heavy metals. The question is, not are you toxic or not, it's how many toxins you have in your body. Everyone has toxins, and our livers have to bear that burden. So I think it's just a really good idea to support your liver with nutrients that facilitate its function so that you can feel better. When your liver is working better, you feel better as well. So definitely go check out my supplement Liver Rehab by Bio Rehab on Amazon.com. Our guest today is Dr. Izabella Wentz. She is a pharmacist. She's a Pharma D, and she's very passionate, innovative, and solution-focused about Hashimoto's disease. And she's had a passion for healthcare since she was a little girl, helping her mother out in her medical clinic. Her mother is a physician, and she was a physician in Poland for many years. And Izabella pursued a degree in pharmacy with a dream of one day finding a cure for a disease. She got her pharma degree, her doctorate of pharmacy, from the Midwestern University of Chicago College at the age of 23. After graduation, she worked as a community pharmacist, a clinical consulting pharmacist, and later a medical safety pharmacist. After being diagnosed with Hashimoto's thyroiditis in 2009, Dr. Wentz was surprised the lack of knowledge about lifestyle interventions for Hashimoto's hypothyroidism and autoimmune conditions in general. So she decided to take on lifestyle interventions as a personal mission as an effort to help herself and others with Hashimoto's. Izabella, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, Wendy. Thank you so much for having me. It's so excited to be here with you.
Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your journey and your experience with your own diagnosis with Hashimoto's?
So in full disclosure, I'm trained as a pharmacist, and I was never interested in the thyroid gland during pharmacy school or even after pharmacy school. I really had to become Hashimoto's or thyroid expert after being diagnosed myself in 2009. As many of us are, with our own health journeys, we really have to become the expert of our own health conditions. And so I had been struggling with anxiety. I had really bad fatigue, so I was sleeping for 12 to 13 hours each night. I was sleeping under 2 blankets in Southern California. In the middle of the summer, I was the woman that was wearing, like a sweater and a scarf at my office where all the other women were wearing short sleeves and short skirts. Maybe not that short, but nonetheless. And I just was having all these weird symptoms, and they started during my freshman year in undergrad. And the fatigue started then, and it was like almost every other year I'd come up with a new symptom. So then like 2 years later, I started getting irritable bowel syndrome. 2 years after that, I started getting anxiety. Then I started getting acid reflux. Then it was hair loss. Then it was carpal tunnel in both of my arms. And I just felt like I was falling apart, and I was in my mid 20s. So I would go to different doctors and I try to get an assessment and a physical exam. And I heard a lot of really funny things like, you're just getting older, or everybody's tired, or wow, you get to sleep for 12 hours. Lucky you. I wish I got to sleep for 12 hours. Maybe when you have kids, you won't be so lazy or self-centered. So I really didn't get a lot of sympathy, and I didn't get a lot of help from doctors or, family members. People were just kind of like, the biggest offer of help I got was to put me on antidepressants or on anti-anxiety medications, which I was like, well, I'm not really depressed. I feel happy. I'm just really tired all the time. And every now and then I have these weird panic attacks. Like my husband would go out running and he'd say, okay, I'll be back in 30 minutes. And 35 minutes would pass. And I'd be like, he ran off with another woman.
Yeah.
Or, or maybe he got hit by a car. And I would just get really, really anxious. And there were times where I'd grab my dog and start driving around in my car looking for him because I was so worried about him going running. And so I knew I wasn't being reasonable, but I just really couldn't control the anxiety. And so finally in 2009, I ended up finding a doctor that was willing to do some more comprehensive testing with me. And at that point, I learned that I had Hashimoto's, and it made a lot of sense. I was like, this is finally an answer. And I thought getting on medications would be very, very helpful since my thyroid was underactive. But then, of course, I realized that it was an autoimmune condition, which happened to attack my thyroid gland. And I was like, well, doctor, what are we going to do about this autoimmune attack? And the answer was, well, we really can't do anything. We just kind of have to sit around and wait for it to burn itself out. So I wanted to figure out if there was anything I can do to slow down the attack, to, if there was anything I caused to induce the condition, and if there was any way I could reverse the condition. And that's kind of how I got into this journey of being a guinea pig / expert in Hashimoto's.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely relate to what you were saying when you said you were having anxiety and emotional symptoms. Because when I had hypothyroidism, I didn't have Hashimoto's, but when I had low thyroid functioning, I had the same thing. I had like anger and anxiety, and I didn't feel like myself emotionally at all. And that's what happens when you have low thyroid functioning or Hashimoto's. You have these kind of not real severe, but irritating and uncomfortable physical symptoms, and you have the emotional symptoms as well. And I knew intuitively that something was wrong, which caused me to eventually seek help. But I totally identify with those emotional symptoms that you just know that that's not you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I've actually seen some people who were misdiagnosed with depression, with panic attacks, put on antidepressant medications. Some people were misdiagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I've even seen some people hospitalized with like psychotic disorders because of a thyroid imbalance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I wanted to talk about Hashimoto's because it's, the most common cause of thyroid dysfunction. Can you tell us exactly what it is, just for anyone who's not familiar with Hashimoto's?
Yeah, absolutely. So Hashimoto sounds like a really rare exotic condition, but it's actually pretty common. So depending on the studies we look at, anywhere from 5% to 24% of people may actually have the markers of Hashimoto's. And basically what's happening in Hashimoto's is immune cells, so cells from our immune system, start getting into the thyroid gland, and they start slowly destroying the thyroid gland and causing inflammation. So it's known as an autoimmune condition. So basically when our own immune system begins to recognize a part of our body as a foreign invader. And so this is a condition that's been recognized for about 100 years now. And it's the leading cause of hypothyroidism or an underactive thyroid in the United States and pretty much in countries of, that add iodine to the salt supply. So Western countries like most of Europe, Australia, United Kingdom, countries that are, more of the developing countries that do not yet add iodine to the salt supply, we're going to see higher levels of iodine deficiency, which can also result in an underactive thyroid. However, in Hashimoto's, it's actually, in most cases, people do not have an iodine deficiency. It's an autoimmune process that attacks the thyroid gland. So that's important to know if you are somebody who's suffering from an underactive thyroid, to see whether it's Hashimoto's or not. Because if it's Hashimoto's, there's one way to treat it. And if it's iodine deficiency hypothyroid, there's a completely different way to treat that. And, the treatments that you do for one can actually make the other worse.
Yeah, yeah. Very important, because a lot of doctors, when, patients are going to their physician, the doctor will check the T3 and the T4, but they don't do a complete thyroid panel and check the antibodies to double check to make sure it's not autoimmune. So you have to be very vigilant as a patient to get, ask and demand for a complete thyroid panel that includes antibodies.
Absolutely. So the thyroid antibodies are going to be basically markers that let you know that your immune system has started to recognize the thyroid as a foreign invader. And there's two types of antibodies. There are thyroid peroxidase antibodies, and that's TPO, and then thyroglobulin antibodies, TG antibodies, that are going to be the most common in Hashimoto's. And these antibodies can sometimes be elevated for maybe a decade, sometimes even longer, before you see a change in thyroid hormone function. So they're going to be one of the earliest markers to know that you have Hashimoto's or some sort of dysfunction. Now, back in the day, people thought that that Hashimoto's was only a problem once it turned into hypothyroidism, that it was the lack of thyroid hormone that resulted in all the symptoms. However, now we're learning that actually Hashimoto's, euthyroid Hashimoto's, which basically means when your thyroid function is still normal, can still be responsible for a lot of symptoms. And a lot of them are going to be symptoms like the anxiety, like the mood issues, trouble with fatigue, trouble with putting on excess weight. And so those are going to be some of the biggest things that that women will complain about when they have this condition. And again, if you just do the TSH or the free T3, free T4, you may not pick up that you have this underlying, basically attack that's happening within your own body. The other thing to consider is some people may have seronegative Hashimoto's, which means that they don't test positive for the antibodies.
Yes.
But sure enough, that attack is still happening in the thyroid gland. So another thing you also want to ask for at least once is getting a thyroid ultrasound to see, what exactly is happening inside of the thyroid gland.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's going to be my next question, is that when you, just because you test negative for the antibodies or that they're normal, doesn't necessarily rule out Hashimoto's, because that they don't always, show on a test. So let's talk about some of the underlying root causes of Hashimoto's.
Some of the root causes, if I could categorize them into 6 different buckets, I would say they're going to be nutrient depletions. They're going to be food sensitivities. They're going to be chronic infections, impaired ability to tolerate stress, impaired ability to get rid of toxins, and then some sort of gut issue. So something that leads to your gut being leaky.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and so there's a few doctors that believe that you have to have leaky gut in order to have an autoimmune disease like Hashimoto's. What's your take on that?
So looking at the latest research in autoimmune theories, there is something known as the 3-legged stool of autoimmunity. And basically that theory states that you have to have the right genetic predisposition, you have to have some sort of a trigger, and then you also need to have intestinal permeability or the leaky gut in order to develop an autoimmune condition. So for me, this is actually pretty easy to believe, because I had irritable bowel syndrome and I had acid reflux, and every symptom in the book of having intestinal permeability. So that was a pretty easy thing for me to believe. And then once I addressed all of these things, then I started actually getting into remission and getting better. So once I addressed once my gut stabilized, then my autoimmune condition stabilized as well. So it's pretty easy for me to believe that, but there's other places that can be leaky in the body as well. So, for example, some people might have dental infections or sinus infections that are actually contributing to the autoimmunity. And so it's kind of, I think for the majority of people, they will have the leaky gut. I would say if I'm working with a person with Hashimoto's, I'm already making the assumption that they have a leaky gut, even if they're not symptomatic. And then we're doing everything to try to get their gut health in order.
Yeah, and I work with a lot of clients, and I find that most people have a number of chronic infections in their body. They're low grade, or they're not symptomatic. They can have gut infections, gut dysbiosis, parasites, candida, all kinds of different infections in the body that suppress your immune system, or they make it overactive. And, when you have that three-legged stool in place and you have these chronic infections, it can be very problematic in promoting Hashimoto's.
Yeah, absolutely. So the autoimmune theories, there's the theory of molecular mimicry, which basically means that if you have some sort of an infection, it might have proteins on it that look like the proteins on your thyroid gland. So when immune system is confused, basically it'll attack both the infection and both the thyroid gland. And so I like to think of basically an immune system walking around taking snapshots with its iPhone of the bacteria and saying, hey, this is what we need to attack, but they only take a picture, of the left leg of the bacteria and and somehow that looks like the thyroid gland. And so that's one way that infections can actually trigger Hashimoto's. Another way is if the infections are physically in the gut, so they're going to cause an intestinal permeability or that leaky gut. So this goes for parasites, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, dysbiosis, yeast, things like that. And then the third way that infections can trigger Hashimoto's is they can actually infect the thyroid gland. So we'll see that with viral infections like the Epstein-Barr virus, which has been found in a big percentage of people with Hashimoto's. And then what's happening there, it's called the bystander effect, where basically the immune system tries to kill off the infection and attacks its home. And unfortunately, the home happens to be the thyroid gland.
Yeah. And that's why I always recommend my client base, they use an infrared sauna because that's very, very effective at killing off any kind of infection you have in your body. It's amazing, and you don't have to take antibiotics, et cetera, et cetera.
And it's something that fevers are basically a way of our bodies to help clear out infections. And so nowadays, the minute that you start getting a fever, there's a chance that you were given an NSAID medication, not allowing your body, or, like an aspirin or Tylenol or ibuprofen, not allowing your body to really fight off the infection, because that's one of our body's protective mechanisms. So when you step into an infrared sauna, this is going to elevate your core temperature, and that's going to help you get rid of the infection. Another kind of thing that happens when people become hypothyroid is they actually, their body temperature is going to be lower. So then they're going to be at risk for collecting more infections. And they're also going to be at risk for collecting more toxins, because as they get these toxins into their bodies, one of the primary ways of getting rid of toxins is through sweating. So when you have a low body temperature and when you're not going to be properly fighting infections, and you're not going to be getting rid of your toxins. And that's kind of, the self-perpetuating cycle of Hashimoto. So we really need to do things that are outside of the norm to kind of break that cycle apart. And I love the infrared sauna because you can, it feels really, really great to be in it. And then it's a great way to get rid of toxins as well as help your body overcome infections.
And it gives you flawless skin, very soft skin too.
You can't argue with that, right?
Yeah.
I feel like, and I don't know if this has been scientifically tested, but I always feel like my hair just grows nicer whenever I'm, exposed to either if I'm on a beach somewhere or somewhere warm or in a sauna. I just feel like it really helps my hair growth.
Yeah, and I'm starting to get the flu. My business partner has the flu, and so I'm been exposed to it. So I feel like I'm kind of starting to fight it, and I've just been getting in the infrared sauna twice a day to try to kill off the virus and prevent the viral replication. So that's why I always advocate. I love the sauna space saunas, beautiful near infrared saunas, because they're the kind that I use. And I think it's so important for anyone, not just people with Hashimoto's and other kinds of autoimmune issues, but anyone can benefit from infrared sauna use.
Yeah, I agree. And it's so nice to be inside of one too. It's fun as opposed to taking something like antibiotics, which will, sometimes put you out on the couch or give you a lot of side effects. So the infrared sauna is actually very pleasurable to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I love getting in mine. And I love doing social media in it too. So let's talk about food sensitivities and Hashimoto's. So can you kind of detail the diet you advise for healing Hashimoto's? Like, should everyone with Hashimoto's avoid gluten and dairy?
In my opinion, yes. So I know not a lot of people like to hear that, and it doesn't make me very popular at dinner parties. But generally, gluten-free and dairy-free, as well as soy-free, is what I recommend as a starting point for people with Hashimoto's. I have seen some people get into remission just by following that. So within 3 months, they'll start a gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free diet, and then they'll get their Hashimoto's into remission. So sometimes the antibodies will go away, the symptoms will go away, and I have seen some people who are able to, normalize their thyroid function and are able to, either reduce their dosage of medication or even get off of medication. So these are people who clearly food sensitivity was a trigger for. And once you get the food sensitivities out of the body, then everything else kind of rebalances itself out. That would be a starting point. If somebody's been doing that for 3 months, however, I would start looking at getting onto more advanced diets. So the paleo diet has been one of the most helpful diets for people with Hashimoto's, and then the next level beyond that is the autoimmune paleo diet. So the autoimmune paleo diet is going to be kind of a stricter version of paleo. So paleo will exclude grains, obviously gluten, dairy, soy, and then all kinds of grains. With the autoimmune paleo, you're going to be excluding, in addition to that, nightshades, which are things like tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants. You're going to be excluding eggs. You're going to be excluding nuts as well as seeds. And this is going to be something that's not really meant to be lifelong. You want to do that for maybe 30 to 60 days and then start introducing different foods. So the thing about food sensitivities, there's going to be primary ones and secondary ones. So the primary ones are going to be like the gluten, dairy, and soy. But and those are things that people may need to stay off of long term. But the other foods, usually people can start reintroducing them back into the diet once they've had enough gut healing. But when you have this really, really leaky gut, is basically any kind of food protein is going to be recognized as a foreign invader. So that's why in the autoimmune paleo diet, you want to exclude some of the more irritating foods. And then capsaicin peppers, so not the pepper you would put on as a spice, but bell peppers and hot spicy peppers are also going to be something that can contribute to leaky gut. So that's something that I recommend for people when they're on the paleo diet to look into not doing the peppers because they can be contributory. But yeah, we've seen a lot of improvement with people on those diets, and sometimes it's unbelievable to me how much those diets help, because people will have like 3 or 4 autoimmune conditions and they'll say like all of my symptoms are gone, and I'm like, really? Like, wow. So it's always really nice to hear what these diets will do for people. But generally 88% of my readers said that the gluten-free diet has helped them tremendously. About 80% will say the same thing about the dairy-free diet as well as the paleo diet. And then somewhere between 75 to 78% will report that autoimmune paleo diet helped them as well. And then anywhere from 20 to 40% of people will see a significant reduction in thyroid antibodies on those diets.
Mm-hmm. And can you explain the concept of molecular mimicry when it comes to consumption of gluten and dairy and why it's in soy, and why it's so important to exclude those gluten proteins and dairy proteins from your diet when you have Hashimoto's?
Yeah, so definitely there's the most research behind this is going to be with gluten, and basically the same thing with infectious proteins. The gluten protein it's not easily broken down by the body, first of all. So it's going to cause inflammation and leaky gut for everybody that eats it. And then there are some studies suggesting that it may cross-react with some aspects of the thyroid gland. So there was a study in people in Italy, out of all places, who had celiac disease and Hashimoto's, and they were able to, once they were started on the gluten-free diet, they were able to reverse their Hashimoto's once they got rid of gluten from their diet. But I found that it's not just people with celiac disease that feel much, much better. So we went with, with our survey of about 2,200 people with Hashimoto's, 88% felt better on a gluten-free diet, where only like 3.5% had celiac disease. And the rates of celiac disease that have been described in Hashimoto's are somewhere, between 3 and 10%. So, of course, it's not just celiac disease, because we obviously know that gluten is an issue in celiac disease, but definitely Hashimoto's. There may be some components of the thyroid gland that cross-react with gluten that can be an issue for sure.
Yeah. And so let's talk about my favorite subject, which is toxicity.
Yes.
And so how does, toxicity of the thyroid and the body with heavy metals and chemicals affect its functioning and contribute to Hashimoto's?
So there's different toxins that can impact thyroid function, either directly or indirectly. So one of them, for example, is fluoride in our water supply, right? So fluoride was used as a thyroid suppressing medication for people with an overactive thyroid because it caused damage to thyroid cells. And so when we're drinking water from the tap, or we're having toothpaste, or we're having a lot of tea with fluoride in it, that's going to cause some damage to the thyroid gland. And this initial damage can actually signal the immune response to come into the thyroid gland. And initially the immune cells have good intentions, so they want to fix the thyroid gland, but maybe in the presence of having additional triggers or having the intestinal permeability where the immune system doesn't mature properly, somehow this turns into an attack. So it's like, buying a guard dog, and then later the guard dog starts attacking you. Mm-hmm. And so this is something that was one of the bigger things that's been associated with Hashimoto's, but also mercury, any kind of halogens are going to have the potential to take up residence inside of the thyroid gland. So bromine, this is going to be something that is going to be found in our mattresses as a flame retardant, and that can definitely take up residence in the thyroid. Radiation, so exposure to radiation, I was personally exposed to Chernobyl, the nuclear disaster. I was about 6 hours away from that when it happened. I was 3.5 years old. So these are things that are going to be potentially causing damage to the thyroid gland directly. And then there's other kinds of chemicals in our environment that may be potentially changing how our estrogen functions and just changing and shifting the immune system. So endocrine disrupting chemicals like BPAs that are found in our plastics, these can contribute to thyroid abnormalities. The triclosan that's found in our antibacterial soaps, that's has some research in causing an increased rate of thyroid antibodies. And then, mercury is one of those toxins that can actually reside inside of the thyroid gland. So they found mercury levels in thyroid gland on autopsy, and we know that just causes all kinds of inflammation throughout the body and can cause an autoimmune attack on the affected organ if it's stored inside of it. So that's kind of a general overview. There's a lot of different toxins that can affect our thyroid function, and whenever we have toxins in our bodies, our liver is going to become compromised. And then we don't, that makes it harder for us to tolerate foods. That makes it harder for us to convert thyroid hormones. And so it's kind of this, the body is this big system of checks and balances, and we're constantly in communication. It's constantly communicating with. Okay, let's start that again. So we're in a constant state of communication. Our cells are in a constant state of communication. So there's a variety of different pathways where toxins can come into play and really disrupt thyroid function.
Yeah, and I think it's very important also to mention that when you have Hashimoto's or any kind of thyroid dysfunction, you have to think of it systemically and treat the whole body, not just focusing on treating the thyroid or using medications or what have you, or taking targeted supplements. You have to detox your entire body in order to move forward towards reversing the issue. And also, I think it's very important to mention that fluoride is found in a lot of antidepressants. Paxil is made with fluoride, so people get a lot of toxicity that way. And through taking a shower, even if you're not drinking tap water, if you don't have a filter on your shower, you're absorbing that through your skin. Bromine is used as a dose softener and to treat pools and jacuzzis. And chlorine is also in that same family of halogens. Chlorine and fluoride and the bromine, those are all in the same family. So anytime you're swimming in a pool or that's also added to water, you can smell it sometimes when you're taking a shower. So it's used in bleach. So all these kind of things can contribute and really compete with iodine for entry into your thyroid. So let's talk a little bit about iodine. There's some debate, some consensus about whether people should take iodine or kelp supplements when they have Hashimoto's. What is your ideas behind that?
It's a very controversial topic because historically, if you had an underactive thyroid, that was because you weren't getting enough iodine in your diet. So iodine was the cure for an underactive thyroid back in the day. And some people will say, okay, well, that's how it used to be, so why isn't it still this way? And so what's happened since the 50s is basically public health officials have noticed that rates where there wasn't enough iodine in our food supply, people ended up with goiter or an underactive thyroid. So they decided to remedy that and add iodine to our salt supply. Unfortunately, what we've learned since that time is that iodine is a very, very narrow therapeutic index nutrient, which basically means that you need to have, it's kind of like a Goldilocks nutrient. So you need to have just the right amount of it for proper thyroid function. And some people who are maybe not genetically predisposed to Hashimoto's, they may be able to tolerate very, very high levels of iodine without any problems. But in those with Hashimoto's, the science has found that, somewhere under 500 micrograms is where anything above 500 micrograms is where it might start being problematic. So you actually see higher rates of Hashimoto's, higher rates of thyroid cell destruction, and higher rates of TSH. So we want to try to get that nutrient somewhere around under 250 micrograms and get enough of it. So obviously it's necessary for thyroid hormone production, but not too much. And it can get a little bit tricky. But we, every now and then I'll have a client that comes to me who basically followed a high-dose iodine protocol, either on their own or with maybe a practitioner or a coach that wasn't as familiar with Hashimoto's. And we'll see, they'll be like, I'm pretty much bedridden. I was feeling okay. I just was a little bit tired, and then I started getting more energy on the iodine, which would make sense because it creates more thyroid hormone and creates more cell turnover, but that also attracts more of the immune response, right? And so, and then eventually more thyroid cells are broken down. This gives you a boost of energy, but it's basically like, somebody shaking the thyroid gland and then making it release more hormone in the long run, but also damaging it more. And so I'll have these clients and they'll say, okay, I'm bedridden. Their TSH goes up to anywhere from 90 to 100. Their thyroid antibodies skyrocket, from maybe if they started off with 300, they'll go to like 1,000 in their antibodies. And then their levels of free hormones will also drop. And so at that point, what we'll have to do is really work with them to try to basically balance the inflammation, and we'll try to get them on, we'll obviously stop the high-dose iodine supplement, we'll try to get them on like a selenium supplement, we will get them on fatty acids, we'll get them on B vitamins, vitamin C, things like that, and acetylcysteine, and then look at removing inflammatory foods from their diet. So, and that usually will do kind of the trick in calming down the autoimmune response. But in the short term, it can actually, if you take high doses of iodine, and this doesn't happen in everybody. So surveying my clients, about 30% felt better on high-dose iodine, but 30% felt worse. And so, looking at that, like some people just get dramatically worse. So it's not something I recommend right away. It's something that I would want to make sure that they actually were iodine deficient if I were to recommend that. And I would, there's a lot of other interventions that can basically bring remission and resolve all the symptoms that I would recommend first. I probably have like 30 recommendations that I would make before I would say like, well, let's look at your iodine, because that's not really as relevant. So like the gluten-free diet, 88% people felt better on it, and then like there was one random person who said they felt worse on it. So out of like over 2,000 people. So I like to start with the more of the safer and more effective recommendations first. But yeah, not to say that nobody's ever been helped by high doses of iodine. It's just kind of, it's pretty risky. So I treat it like a drug, like I would do with giving somebody antibiotics or something like that. It's like you want to weigh your risk to benefits and see if there's other things you can do first before you go there, right?
Yeah, and you get iodine in fish as well. But the problem with eating fish is it has mercury, unless it's the little fish, like the little gross ones people don't like to eat, like sardines and fresh anchovies, mackerel. I know, I love them, but a lot of people don't. But even salmon has significant levels of mercury in them, and I find people are kind of freely eating that and not really thinking about that, but it does contribute to mercury load. I see it in client after client after client because I do lots of heavy metals testing with all of my clients, and so the salmon can be problematic, especially tuna. Forget it. Tuna is completely off the list to lower your mercury levels. And I find the majority of my clients, probably 90% of them, maybe 85, have mercury toxicity to some degree. So it's a big problem, not just with people with Hashimoto's.
Yeah, definitely it's something in Hashimoto's that we often see, and it's like we said, like we talked about, the lack of sweating is also going to have you build up on your levels of mercury and other kinds of toxins because you're not sweating them out properly. And then we have some people with methylation issues, so they might have the MTHFR gene mutation. And I don't know, there was one study that suggested it was more common in people with Hashimoto's. I'm not quite sure if that's true or not, but I definitely, whenever I have somebody with Hashimoto's, I'll want to make sure that their methylation pathways are properly supported, because if they're not methylating properly, they're not going to be able to get rid of toxins properly. And so that is often something that is definitely going to be an issue with people. And sometimes, removing gut inflammation will help them clear out toxins on their own and just getting rid of the foods. Other times, we might do more aggressive measures. So, you might do some supplements, and other times, some people might even have to do something like chelation to try to get rid of those things. But
I agree with that. I used to be kind of against chelation, oral chelation, but some people, even if you completely support the body with supplements and infrared saunas and doing everything you can to facilitate detox, they can't do it because they have methylation issues, and you have to go in and actually physically, rip them out of their body with the oral chelation because they're just not able to do it on their own. So can we talk about some of the things that people are doing today to suppress their thyroid functioning?
Yeah, so definitely, drinking water from the tap, that would be one of the first things that I would recommend, is getting a filter. So reverse osmosis is the best way to remove fluoride from your water. That's going to be one of the ways that people just, you're like, I'm drinking lots of water, I'm being healthy, but you're suppressing your thyroid. Eating gluten, and, one of my big things was eating whole grains before I was diagnosed, because I thought that was what you were supposed to do. I thought it was like low-fat dairy and whole grains were the way to go.
Cheerios, eating Cheerios are heart healthy.
Exactly. So I was doing all those things, and then, potentially those are the most common food sensitivities in people in general, and they can be potential autoimmune triggers. So getting off of those is going to be something that I recommend for people that want to have a healthy, functioning thyroid gland. Then we have people who are, paleo or are on a grain-free diet. And oftentimes what happens is they become depleted in selenium and the B vitamins. And now selenium and B vitamins are going to be very, very helpful for thyroid function and required for thyroid function. So oftentimes, I'll see people who are on these awesome paleo diets, and you'll want to probably supplement with like a selenium or a B vitamin at that point if you're not feeling well, and you want to make sure that your thyroid is working properly. And then, just stress, just putting yourself in a stressful situation. So we didn't talk a lot about the adrenals, but the adrenals are basically going to be working in synergy with the thyroid gland. At any time we have a lot of stress happening, our bodies are going to be producing something that's known as reverse T3. Reverse T3 is basically the opposite of active T3, which is our active thyroid hormone. And what it does is, instead of, making our hair grow pretty, giving us lots of energy, and having managing our metabolism, reverse T3 takes up thyroid receptors and just kind of sits there. So it just basically blocks the thyroid receptors from receiving any T3. So it's kind of like, if you think about, a car, reverse T3 would be like the brake that's saying, stop it. We're not going anywhere. And so just having a lot of stress in your life. So, whether the stress is coming from an emotional standpoint, from others around you, from not getting enough sleep, from having inflammatory foods or inflammatory people, blood sugar imbalances, or infections or toxins in your body, those are things that are going to be contributing to depressed thyroid function.
Yeah, and I found that clients that have reverse T3 of 10 or above, it's definitely a sign they've got major toxicity in their body that needs to be addressed. I think everyone has to address that, but some more than others, with high reverse T3.
And definitely, whenever you see, I would totally agree with you that whenever we see elevated reverse T3, that would be a good indication of toxicity in the body.
Yeah. Yeah, so did you have anything else that you wanted to contribute that maybe we haven't talked about regarding Hashimoto's?
One of the things that I like to do with my clients is I have everybody do an adrenal saliva test, and then I have everybody do a gut test, a stool test. And they don't really like me when I send them the stool test, but we often will find really interesting results on it. And I've seen that people who don't get better on just the nutrition part, on the gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free diet, they will often have one or more gut infections. And treating those gut infections is going to be very, very helpful with reducing your reaction to foods, so you can actually start tolerating more foods and you can start feeling better. And I'll also see a big reduction in thyroid antibodies, and things sort of start moving in the right direction once we can clear those gut infections.
Yeah, why don't you talk a little bit about your book? You have your book called The Root Cause, Hashimoto's The Root Cause. Can you talk a little bit about that? It's been a bestseller on Amazon. It's been very, very successful because it's a terrific book.
Well, thank you so much. It's I ended up basically when I was going through my health journey, I was basically having a lot of brain fog, and I started to kind of keep this journal, and I started to note down things, and I was always trying to research different things, and I was spending a lot of time on PubMed and going to functional medicine conferences and things like that to try to figure out what was going on with my own health. And then eventually I started to see some improvement with implementing some of the things that I was journaling and some of the things that I was researching and testing. And my mom said to me, okay, you need to start writing these things down, and why don't you publish a book? We're going to get this information out so that your cousin, I have a cousin in Poland who was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, that we can help her too. And my mom offered to translate it into Polish, and then that's kind of how the book writing started happening. It was just basically my own journal to help myself get better. Eventually, as I was writing the book, I ended up being able to get myself into remission from Hashimoto's, and then released the book in June of 2013, just with the hope that it would help anybody else that's kind of was suffering from some of the same things I was suffering from. And we've gotten over 1,000 reviews on it now on Amazon, mostly 5-star. It became a New York Times bestseller, which was a big surprise for me because I definitely was not expecting that to happen, or wasn't even trying for that. But what people have said about it is that it really helps to shorten their learning curve, and it helps to streamline their journey with Hashimoto's, because there's a lot of conflicting information out there, and then you don't really know who to trust and who to believe. And I just really wrote from the heart, and I really wrote about what helped me. I don't know that every single person that reads the book will have the same exact results that I have had with it, but just judging on everybody's feedback, a lot of people have found that it's been very, very helpful for them. So we cover my dig at it approach, which looks at nutrient depletions, looks at digestion, so whether somebody has a lack of digestive enzymes that can contribute to a lot of the symptoms. We look at infections, inflammation, iodine status, the gut function, gluten, food sensitivities, adrenals, toxins, other types of triggers, and alkaline phosphatase. So this is something that helps us tolerate our gut bacteria. If we don't have enough of that, then we need to get more get more of that on board, whether that's through zinc supplementation, adding certain foods, or getting rid of other types of foods, or working out with supplements to alkalize the body. So it's a pretty comprehensive approach, and hopefully people have found, I know that a lot of people have found it helpful in their journeys, and it's more than I could ever wish for.
Yeah, I know, it's fantastic. I congratulate your success. And what really kind of what you mentioned is that, all the suggestions helped you, but not everyone is helped. But I think that, the longer you have an autoimmune disease, the more permanent damage you have that may not allow you to have full remission, even if you can do everything possible. Because once that tissue is destroyed, if you've had Hashimoto's for 20 years, you're going to have a lot of tissue damage. But, of course, you still have to do everything you can and follow the suggestions in your book to have the optimal outcome.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Wendy. The longer you've had the condition, the more problematic it becomes. So Hashimoto's is pretty much described as a condition of 5 stages. In the first stage, you just have the genetic predisposition, so you're not going to have any changes in your thyroid function. You're not going to have any immune cells in your thyroid gland. So for all intents and purposes, you have a normal thyroid. And then as the stages progress, you start seeing some autoimmune damage. You start seeing some of those cells in the thyroid gland. Then you start seeing changes in damage to the thyroid gland and changes in thyroid hormone levels. And eventually that can progress to the 5th stage, which is actually progression to other types of autoimmune conditions. where a person might start off with Hashimoto's, but they may have lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, or they may progress to a different condition. And that's definitely something we want to prevent. So we can always try to go back in phases or stages, or try to arrest the progression of the Hashimoto's. And basically what I tell people that I work with, or people, that are kind of new to Hashimoto's, is that getting rid of your symptoms is possible for just about every person. So if you follow the root cause approach, if you get your medications optimized, there's a really, really great chance that you're going to be living an amazing life. You're going to feel really, really great for, 90% of the time. Then there's a subset of people who actually can get into remission by following the root cause approach. And these people are going to see a reduction in, or, basically elimination of thyroid antibodies. And then there's also a subset of people that may actually be able to get off of thyroid medications. And so thyroid tissue, we know it can regenerate, so it does for some people. I used to think it was people who had the condition for a shorter amount of time and who were younger. So, maybe those 19-year-olds that were so resilient. But every now and then I'll get like a remission story of a woman in her 40s or 50s who's had the condition for 20 years. And she'll say, I uncovered my triggers. I got rid of that H. pylori infection, and I got off of gluten, and I added these nutrients. Lo and behold, I became hyperthyroid. My doctor took me off of my medication. I've never felt better.
Wow.
And I don't have any more antibodies. So it just really depends. There's also some tissue healing protocols that I'm going to be writing about soon, but basically you can, infrared sauna of course helps as well, but also doing cold laser therapy directly on your thyroid glands. So there were some Brazilian studies that found about half of the people who underwent this type of treatment, and it's like a specific laser, specific wavelength for a specific amount of time and 10 sessions, they ended up, half of them were able to get off of their thyroid medications and stay off of them for at least 9 months was how long the people followed them. Wow. So there's a lot of different options on there. And, I'm kind of, I'm not somebody that likes to be attached to dogmas. I'm sort of like, okay, what can we do to help a person, whether that is some cool like biohacking stuff, whether it's like completely traditional medicine, or whether it's natural. So I'm always just looking for things to share with people that can help them on their journeys, whether that's, whether they're things that are prescription drugs or completely natural therapies, or simple biohacking stuff like we did a couple of weeks ago, right?
Absolutely, at the Bulletproof Conference. Yeah, and I agree with you. Everyone's different, and different strokes for different folks. People need different supplements, different foods, and some infrared sauna doesn't work for some people. Everyone's going to just find what works for them as an individual. And also, I was going to ask you, what do you think about using thyroid glandulars for thyroid regeneration?
So I've had some good results with Itrophin PNG from a company called Standard Process. And, I'm trained in pharmacology, and the way that they explain the mechanism of action doesn't quite make sense to me, but I have seen it work. Where what they say is basically that the protomorphogen is kind of the cytosol of the cell. So it basically gives the organ kind of like a roadmap, or basically gives them the signal to start regenerating. And so that's what the company says is in that extract. And of course it's a proprietary product, so I'm not sure that's been tested by outside sources. But at the same time, I've seen it to be very helpful for my clients in reducing their need for thyroid medication and normalizing their thyroid numbers, including their antibodies. So this is one supplement that I've found to be very helpful. And it's not a straight up glandular, but it is, I would consider it in the glandular category. And then, as far as medication use, generally I would recommend for people to have a combination T4, T3 medication. Some of them, those are going to be like the natural desiccated thyroid meds as well. I found those to be helpful. And you see a reduction in thyroid antibodies whenever you start on those medications, or just any medications in general, because that medication basically suppresses the thyroid stress signal, which basically causes more immune cells to get into the thyroid. So those can be helpful because they basically give your own thyroid gland kind of like a rest. and then they make your thyroid gland less visible to the immune
Yeah,
system.
that's a very good point that it can, that you're saying that essentially that it can facilitate healing because it stops the thyroid from having to produce thyroid hormones. And I'm totally all for intelligent allopathy. I took thyroid medication for a little while, and it was very helpful in mitigating my symptoms and making me feel better. So I'm all for people taking thyroid medication, and but I'm also all for healing the thyroid so that you can get off your medication. And not everybody can. I think a lot of people can, but not everyone. So again, I think it's a very individual thing.
Absolutely. And I think it's a great goal to have. And definitely, when I tell my clients is lifestyle changes take some time. Medications work much faster. So don't martyr yourself. If you need to be on medications, that's something that you need to be on. Don't look at it as a life sentence. In some cases, you may be able to reduce the dose or get off of the medication once you heal the underlying triggers that are causing your body to attack your immune system or are preventing your body from healing and regenerating. So yeah, I very much agree with that. You want to make sure that you're, first and foremost, I want to make sure anybody that is suffering, that their suffering is eased first so that they're feeling better. That's going to be a first goal. The second goal is going to be to reduce the inflammation in the thyroid gland and reduce the autoimmune response. And then the third goal is maybe can we work on getting off of the medications? But, it's kind of like every now and then I'll get somebody that will say like, I've had Hashimoto's for 20 years. I have, my antibodies are in the 1,000 range. I want to get off of medications now. But it's like, well, I guess, that's not really the best idea to do at the time, because you want to make sure we fix the underlying issues, because you can make yourself worse if you do that too soon.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, that in natural means, diet and lifestyle and supplements and detox, they take a long time. So
they're worth it.
Yeah, they can take a year, 2 years, 3 years, and longer for some people to heal your thyroid. So, I don't think it's reasonable to expect you can get off your thyroid meds right away. And like you said, some people really truly benefit from reducing their symptoms so their brain can work and they have energy, etc. In the meantime, while the natural means that we're using with diet and lifestyle, etc., can do their magic, and those take time.
And lifestyle, it's like these chronic conditions take a whole lifestyle or whole lifetime of lifestyle to develop. So you can't expect them to change overnight.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I have a question that I like to ask all of my guests. What do you think is the most pressing health issue in the world today?
The most pressing health issue? Thyroid? I actually would say that a lot of people have issues with Hashimoto's. It's such a really, really big condition, and it's under-recognized. Anywhere up to 25% of people may be affected. People may be misdiagnosed with mental health issues. They may be hospitalized. They may be heavily medicated with antipsychotic drugs or antidepressant drugs that basically suppress their chance for, living life. And really, the having an underactive thyroid can lead to so many different things, because thyroid hormones affect every single cell in our body. So then a person may be more likely to get heart disease. A person may be more likely to get, to have issues with diabetes, with their energy. And you just, you just have the thyroid gland. It's such a tiny little gland, and it doesn't get a lot of appreciation, but it controls metabolism throughout the entire body. And so, although, I can't say it's not something like, not something that will kill a person, it definitely suppresses their ability to live the life that they want, because it drains their energy and drains their motivation and life force. So I would say thyroid.
Yeah, and I think it's a huge problem. I mean, the fact that 2/3 of people in the U.S. are overweight, and it's a growing problem worldwide, it's due in a significant part to reduce thyroid function, and our diet and lifestyle and guzzling tap water, drinking a lot of chlorine and fluoride, and all these things that suppress thyroid function. Many people are living a lifestyle that absolutely suppresses their thyroid function, and they pay for it in the inability to lose weight and gaining weight very easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then just autoimmunity in general, because we really don't have you get diagnosed with an autoimmune condition by a conventional medical doctor, and you end up going to see that doctor, and they put you on immune suppressing drugs. that can cause you to pick up infections that can potentially kill you. And so just not having a really good solution from the conventional medical world for any types of autoimmune conditions, I think this is a huge pressing issue. So I think it's up to people like us to really raise the awareness about all of the different lifestyle things and, some of the integrative things and, biohacking things that can really help with autoimmunity, because a lot of the things that we talked about that are relevant to Hashimoto's are also going to be relevant to rheumatoid arthritis, to lupus, and other types of autoimmune conditions.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. It sounds like all the suggestions in your book can be generalized to any kind of autoimmune disorder, because it's the same kind of underlying root cause as the diet and lifestyle and calming down the immune system.
Absolutely. And it just, really depends on your genes as to which autoimmune condition you're going to get.
Yeah, and I think it's just crazy that doctors prescribe these immune suppressing drugs. It's just insanity to me, because it does not address the underlying root cause. It makes you susceptible to all kinds of infections, and there's lymphoma risk with it, etc. And what is your take on that? And if anyone who's considering taking these autoimmune suppressing drugs, I know what they are, I won't mention them.
I would say in the very advanced stages of autoimmunity, when a person is suffering, I totally get that they would want to take those medications, and it's always a risk to benefit with every medication, but a lot of those meds have a lot of risks. So you're at greater risk for infections, you're at greater risk for cancers, but it is something that is worth discussing with your doctor and considering if you're going to be doing it. But please give these other things a try first. Or if you are taking these medications, you don't want to stop them without talking to your doctor or without your doctor's order, but you can do all these lifestyle things along with the drugs or before you do the drugs. And there's actually a medication that is a lot safer. It's known as low dose naltrexone.
Yes.
It can be from a compounded pharmacist that can actually modulate the immune system, and you're not going to be at risk for cancers or infections with this medication, because it works in a much more gentle way, but it can balance the immune system rather than suppress it. So, considering working with a functional medicine doctor, considering, low dose naltrexone, and considering all the lifestyle interventions that we talk about, do those, don't just go to this medication with, don't just go to the suppressing medications, because some of the side effects can be quite scary. When we were in pharmacy school, I just remember they just had started coming out during that time, and we were like, wow, these medications are pretty intense. And so when there are solutions that are safer, that's what I always like to recommend for my clients and patients.
Yeah, I agree. I think medications and surgery should be last resort after you've just tried everything, with the exception of low-dose naltrexone. That's shown in studies to be very, very effective at helping people with autoimmune disease, and it's a very low dose. And so that one I'm all for sure.
Right, and it's a very safe type of medication. Most people are going to tolerate it just fine, and you're not going to run the risks of all these other things with some of those other biologics, as they're known.
Yeah, very few side effects. So why don't you tell the listeners where they can find you and learn more about you?
So my website is thyroidpharmacist.com. They can check out my work there. I do have a gift for them if they go to thyroidpharmacist.com/gift. They're going to get my nutrient depletions and digestion chapter. They're going to get some great recipes as well as the gluten-free quick start guide.
Oh, nice. You have to check that out. Well, Izabella, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you coming on. I know that's going to help so many people that are dealing with Hashimoto's and any kind of autoimmune health issues. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Wendy.
And listeners, if you want to learn more about me, you can go to liveto110.com. You can also go to my new website, mineralpower.com, and you can learn all about my version of paleo, modern paleo, and all about detoxification, my very favorite subject. Thank you so much for listening to the Live to 110 podcast.
Forward to it.
Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself and how you got into the health field?
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Tim Jackson. I finished my doctorate in physical therapy and rehab in 2009, and I've been studying functional medicine for about the past 12 to 13 years, some under different MDs, some under continuing ed courses, but mostly where I learned the best stuff was through self-study. But I started out in undergrad at Wake Forest University in North Carolina, and I got interested in nutrition and exercise while I was there. And so the medical doctors, the medical school said, you should consider other programs because you're not going to get a lot of nutrition and exercise. And I had a pretty traumatic surgery during the senior year or my senior year of undergrad. And when I came out of that surgery, I basically didn't recover very well. I had candida overgrowth, toxic metals, reactions to anesthesia, and just didn't heal properly. So, I kind of bounced around looking for a doctor who could help me. And about 2.5 years later, I found an integrative ear, nose, and throat doctor who diagnosed me with candida, heavy metals, and, that he treated me for those. And that certainly helped, but I, continued to learn, and I knew there was more going on underneath the surface. So then I started exploring, functional endocrinology and functional gastroenterology, and looking at how those factors, play into health or illness and disease. So when I graduated with my doctorate in physical therapy and rehab, it's kind of the same thing as a chiropractor. You do a lot of manual therapy with your hands, but you realize that, if you can balance the body internally, a lot of these external manifestations suddenly start to disappear. A common example is, people with frozen shoulder that cannot move their shoulder at all. They typically come to a doctor of physical therapy for 3 times a week for 2 to 3 months. But if you check them for subclinical hypothyroidism, they almost always come up positive. And if you correct that imbalance, they'll probably get better within weeks. And so I realized quickly that I could do more without my hands than I could with my hands. So I've just continued to study functional medicine since then. I incorporate epigenetics into my practice a lot. I work with a lot of clients with biotoxin related illness, so mold and Lyme and co-infections, et cetera, hormonal imbalances, and also work with a lot of kids on the autism spectrum.
Yeah, and so we're going to talk today on the show about chronic fatigue, because I think
Yeah.
a lack of energy is one of the biggest issues that people are seeking to correct. They want more energy, but more importantly, there's a lot of people